I was dying, but I made sure my cheating girlfriend got what she deserved. I never thought I'd end up here, lying in a hospital bed, staring at the sterile white ceiling, counting down the days until the tumor in my brain finally wins. But here I am, and as I sit here, hooked up to machines that beep and whir like some kind of morbid soundtrack, I can't help but think about how I got here. How a poor kid from the slums ended up in a penthouse, only to lose it all in the most brutal way possible. It all started 15 years ago. I was 22, broke, and desperate. My parents had died in a car crash when I was a teenager, leaving me with nothing but a mountain of debt and a chip on my shoulder. I was working 3 jobs just to keep the lights on, but it wasn't enough. I was drowning, and I knew it. Then one day I got a break, a real break. I was working as a janitor at this fancy office building downtown when I overheard a conversation between 2 executives. They were talking about some big project, and I chimed in with an idea. I don't even know what possessed me to do it. Maybe it was desperation, maybe it was sheer stupidity, but it worked. The CEO, a man named Richard Kensington, was impressed. He offered me a job on the spot. That was the beginning of everything. Richard Kensington wasn't just rich, he was wealthy. The kind of wealthy where money doesn't even matter anymore. He owned half the city, and his company, Kensington Enterprises, was a global powerhouse. But what I admired most about him wasn't his money, it was his work ethic. The man was a machine. He worked 18-hour days, slept 4 hours a night, and still managed to look like he just stepped out of a GQ photo shoot. I threw myself into the job, determined to prove I belonged. I worked harder than anyone else, stayed later, came in earlier. I learned everything I could about the business from the ground up. And Richard noticed. He took me under his wing, mentoring me, teaching me the ropes. Within a few years, I went from being the janitor to being his right-hand man. But it wasn't just professional. Richard became like a father to me. He invited me to his home, introduced me to his family, treated me like I was one of his own. And that's when I met her, Emily Kensington, Richard's daughter. She was beautiful, of course, long blonde hair, piercing blue eyes, the kind of smile that could stop traffic. But it wasn't just her looks that drew me in. She was smart, funny, and had this magnetic energy that made you want to be around her. We hit it off immediately. At first, it was just friendship. We'd hang out at the office, grab lunch together, talk about everything and nothing, but over time it turned into something more. I won't lie, I knew what I was doing. Emily was the heir to the Kensington fortune, and dating her was a surefire way to secure my future. But I also genuinely cared about her, or at least I thought I did. We started dating, and things moved quickly. Richard approved, which surprised me. I thought he'd be protective of his daughter, but he seemed happy that she was with someone he trusted. Within a year, we were living together in a penthouse apartment that Richard gifted us as an engagement present. Life was good. Too good. It all came crashing down 6 months ago. I started getting headaches, bad ones. At first, I thought it was just stress, but then I started forgetting things, losing my balance, slurring my words. I went to the doctor, and that's when they found it, a brain tumor. Inoperable. They gave me 6 months to live. I was devastated, but I tried to stay strong for Emily. She was my rock, or so I thought. She promised to stand by me, to take care of me, to be there until the end. But as the weeks went by, I started noticing things. She was distant, distracted. She'd take phone calls in the other room, leave the house at odd hours, come home smelling like someone else's cologne. I didn't want to believe it. I couldn't. But deep down, I knew. Emily was cheating on me. I didn't confront her right away. Instead, I started digging. I hired a private investigator, installed hidden cameras in the house, and waited. It didn't take long for the truth to come out. Emily wasn't just cheating, she was brazen about it. She'd bring men to our house while I was in the hospital, flaunting her infidelity like it was nothing. I was furious, but I didn't let it show. Instead, I started planning. I knew I didn't have much time left, but I was determined to make sure Emily got what she deserved. 2 weeks ago, I called a meeting. I invited everyone, Emily, Richard's old colleagues, our friends, even the press. I told them it was to discuss my will, but I had something else in mind. When everyone arrived, I played the videos, every single one of them. Emily's face turned white as she watched herself on the screen, laughing and flirting with other men in our house, in our bed. The room was dead silent, the tension so thick you could cut it with a knife. Then I turned to Emily. "You thought I didn't know," I said, my voice steady despite the pain. "You thought you could get away with it, but I'm not going to let you." I pulled out the will I'd prepared and signed it in front of everyone. Every penny, every asset, every share of Kensington Enterprises. It all went to a charity I'd set up for men's mental health. Emily got nothing. The look on her face was priceless. Shock, anger, humiliation, it was all there. But I didn't care. I'd gotten my revenge. Now, as I lie here in this hospital bed, I can't help but feel a sense of satisfaction. I may be dying, but I made sure Emily Kensington got what she deserved. And as the darkness closes in, I can't help but smile. I won. Just when I thought my story was over, fate decided to throw me a curveball. The doctors, who had once given me no hope, called me into their office with news that felt like a punch to the gut. but in the best way possible. A new experimental treatment had shown promise in shrinking tumors like mine. It was risky, with no guarantees, but it was a chance I hadn't had in months. I agreed to it immediately, not because I was desperate to live, but because I realized I wasn't ready to leave my mother behind. She had been my rock, my only true constant, and the thought of her grieving me was unbearable. The treatment was brutal. Days turned into weeks of nausea, exhaustion, and pain so intense, it felt like my skull was splitting open. But through it all, my mother was there. She held my hand, wiped my brow, and whispered words of encouragement when I wanted to give up. She reminded me of the boy I used to be, the one who fought tooth and nail to survive the slums, the one who never backed down from a challenge. Slowly, against all odds, the tumor began to shrink. The doctors were stunned. I was stunned. But my mother? She just smiled and said, "I always knew you were a fighter." As I recovered, I found myself seeing the world differently. The penthouse, the money, the status, none of it mattered anymore. What mattered was the woman who had stood by me when everyone else had walked away. My mother. She had sacrificed everything for me, working double shifts just to put food on the table and never once complaining. I realized how blind I'd been, chasing wealth and validation from people who didn't truly care about me. Emily had been a lesson, a harsh one, but a necessary one. She taught me that not everyone who smiles at you has your best interests at heart. And that made I moved back in with my mother, leaving the penthouse and all its memories behind. It was a humble life, but it was real. For the first time in years, I felt at peace. I spent my days helping her around the house, cooking meals, and listening to her stories about the past. She had a way of making even the simplest moments feel meaningful. I vowed then and there that I would never leave her side again. She had given me everything, and now it was my turn to give back. Though the tumor was gone, the scars it left behind, both physical and emotional, were still there. I had nightmares about Emily, about the betrayal, about the way she had looked at me when I exposed her. I couldn't trust women anymore. Every smile felt like a lie. Every compliment felt like manipulation. My mother tried to reassure me, telling me not to let one bad experience define my life, but I couldn't help it. The walls I had built around my heart were too high, too thick. I threw myself into helping others, channeling my pain into something positive. I volunteered at the men's mental health charity I had set up, sharing my story with men who had been through similar betrayals. It was cathartic in a way to know that my pain could help someone else. But deep down, I knew I was still broken. I avoided relationships, preferring to focus on my work and my mother. She was the only woman I trusted, and the only one who had never let me down. Healing wasn't linear. Some days were good, others were a struggle. But my mother was always there, her quiet strength a constant source of comfort. She encouraged me to forgive, not for Emily's sake, but for my own. Holding on to anger is like drinking poison and expecting the other person to die, she would say. It took time, but I began to let go of the bitterness that had consumed me. I realized that Emily's actions were a reflection of her, not me. I hadn't deserved what she did, but I also didn't deserve to carry the weight of it forever. I started journaling, pouring my thoughts and feelings onto paper. It was a way to process everything I had been through, from the betrayal to the diagnosis to the miracle of survival. Writing became my therapy, a way to make sense of the chaos. I even started working on a memoir, hoping that my story could inspire others to keep fighting, no matter how dark things seemed. My mother was my biggest cheerleader, reading every chapter and offering feedback. Her pride in me was all the validation I needed. Years passed, and my life settled into a new rhythm. The charity grew, helping thousands of men across the country. I found purpose in my work, in my writing, and in taking care of my mother. She was getting older, and I made it my mission to ensure her golden years were as comfortable and joyful as possible. We traveled together, something we had never been able to do before. We visited the places she had always dreamed of seeing, from the Grand Canyon to the beaches of Hawaii. Every moment with her felt like a gift. I never married, never had children. Some people pitied me for it, but I didn't care. I had everything I needed. My mother was my family, my heart, my home. And when she passed away peacefully in her sleep, surrounded by love, I knew I had done right by her. Her legacy wasn't in material things. It was in the love she had given me, the strength she had instilled in me, and the lessons she had taught me about what truly matters in life. In the end, I realized that my story wasn't about revenge or betrayal. It was about redemption, about finding light in the darkest of places. And though I would always carry the scars of my past, they no longer defined me. I was more than the boy from the slums, more than the man who had been betrayed. I was a survivor, a fighter, and most importantly, a son who had loved his mother with everything he had, and that was enough.